It is WeatherBrains, episode number 674. This is the pre-show, a magical part of the program where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and on occasion, say extremely outrageous things. This is the show for December 17th, 2018. This is our next to last show before Christmas. We'll have a Christmas Eve edition that will be released to the world next week. We're actually recording it Thursday. We have no secrets here, Bill. We just tell everybody our secrets.
Yep.
You know,
I was victimized by a Google lane shift there.
Hang on. I can't hear you. And let me see if that's me or you. That might be me.
Okay. Hope it's not me.
Hang on here.
Hope it's not me.
There's a fair chance that's me.
1, 2, 3.
Let's see here.
Check all the wires. Uh-oh.
Kim's joining the call. That's cool.
See if you can see her. Thank you, Don. Wonderful. Look who's back.
Yeah, hello.
Can you hear me, Kim?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you fine. James, can you hear Kim? No? Because he can't hear me. So if he can't hear me and he can't hear you.
No, I have fixed it. That was on my end. Kim, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
And you picked the perfect show to come back on.
Yeah.
Because this show is because of you.
Oh goodness, is it? Which I actually haven't seen who are, at least not today. My memory is about
it's just
2
Jim
inches deep.
Stefkovich. It's not important.
Oh, that's great. Wait, was it connected to me?
It's Gary Allen Fine, the guy who wrote the Authors of the Storm book that you told me about.
Yeah.
I even dressed up for him, Kim.
That's fantastic. Well, good.
James and I came from the NWA local chapter Christmas party, and when I saw those, when I crossed the bridge, James, and saw those headlights, I was like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah. Oops. Yeah.
The show might be late.
We were both at a point not that far away, but we have bad traffic in this market, and you see those brake lights for miles. You're thinking, "Uh-oh."
Now I want to know what rocket scientists thought they were going to chew up like 3.5 miles of interstate tonight. Did you see the state trooper? They were taking the cones back up about 2 miles down the road.
Yeah, they've been working on that spot for days and days.
But they put up cones, Ken, for like 2 miles, and they'll probably get 200 feet tonight. And so they funneled the entire city of Atlanta's traffic down to like one lane, and it's like, okay.
So Kim, tell us about being a new mom. How is it?
Oh my gosh. It feels like I've been a mom for years. I'm sure you guys can understand this feeling. It's been, we're at just over 3 months now. And the first, couple weeks were about survival, just basic. Can we survive this without going completely insane? And, then after the next month 2, cool things start happening. And now at month 3, oh my gosh, she is just such a cool little person. It's pretty wonderful. My daughter's actually with my husband right now, watching football and telling him, she's like recounting all the plays. She's sitting there just talking to him, talk. And her favorite thing to do is to watch football. So
wow, gotta keep her here.
Right? It's pretty great.
So,
pretty great.
Just fair warning, don't blink, because when you do, she'll be graduating from high school.
Yep, you're right.
And then you blink again and she'll be married, and you'll be hearing the song Butterfly Kisses, and it's when it comes to raising children, I think Bill can testify to this. The days are long and the years are short.
Mm-hmm.
So enjoy them.
Yep.
It will go by in just like that, but there are days where you think they will never, ever, ever end.
Oh my gosh.
John turns 15 tomorrow, James. So we'll be going to get a learner's permit on Friday.
Okay.
Wow.
There you go.
Oh, major milestone. How do you feel about that?
I'm warning everybody on the southern half of the county to wrap themselves in bubble wrap right now.
Clear the sidewalks, ladies and gentlemen. No, well, this is great. So let me see what I have not done here. I think I've invited everybody. I've not invited the guests.
I did.
I don't think Kevin.
You can invite any you want, but I've sent them an email, so hopefully they'll come along.
I should have Jim in here.
Yeah, you should. You probably have Keith too. Jim, uses his newer non-governmental email address now.
Yeah, I might have sent this to the wrong one.
Yeah, we learned tonight about your pick. We learned why all the Weather Service offices got taken off Facebook. So
why?
You were over the kids' table, so you didn't hear the story, but
no,
because they're not tied to Stelly.
Hey,
no, I thought that was Steffi. I was like, oh my goodness, we got Stelly and Steffi on the show tonight. Oh, awesome! Hey Keith, how you doing, man?
Can y'all hear me? Okay?
There's the other half of the Bobsey twins. Yeah, we hear you fine.
Perfect.
Can you hear us?
Stelly and Stefki.
Is there any truth to the rumor that you are the James Stefko, Mr. Stefkovich? Oh, see that look? I hit a nerve.
Hey, Jim, you're muted. Hit that unmute button.
We like him muted, James.
It's going to start early and often, I can tell.
Yeah. Wow. This is going to be good.
Oh, you know it. Even if we don't get the main guest on, we'll be fine.
This show will be good from here on. We're good even as it is now.
Hey, Kim, how are you?
Doing well. How are you doing, Jim?
Good. How's that baby doing?
Oh, she's doing really well. I was just telling them that she's having a good time with her father right now watching football, watching the Saints. Cool. Awesome. Yep. She's babbling at the TV, probably doing her own recounting of the play-by-play. It's been a crazy 3 months, I tell you. But I think we're at the point where there's more cool stuff than hard stuff. There's an inflection point in that somewhere, and I think we've reached it.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, you'll blink and they graduate from college.
No,
I said the exact same words. I mean, exact. And I said, you'll be hearing butterfly kisses, and she'll be walking down the aisle, marrying some creeper guy, and it's just it flies by.
You don't want to know what's terrible about getting old, James.
What?
Your fingerprints wear off, and you have to use sort quick in order to be able to pick up pieces of paper. It's the ultimate terrible thing.
Now, I have never had to deal with that. That's Aubrey, look who's here.
I know. So exciting. Congratulations, Kim.
Thanks, Aubrey. It's good to be back.
I thought she was excited you were back, Mr. Stefkovich. I was like, wait a minute. I didn't know these two were tight.
And I think I forgot my earbuds at home. So we're going to see if the IFB works.
I always keep a spare pair of those things because I tend to forget these often. And hey, Dr. John, let's see if you can do that.
That's all, folks.
I restarted my computer before I came on, just in case.
Okay, no, you're good. No, it was like for those that didn't hear it, go back and watch last week's pre-show. No, or wait a minute, it was actually during the show. I think it was after we started the show, maybe.
Yeah, I got on late.
It was that was an interesting little sound effect there for John.
Well, this time our guest, he told me for weeks it was going to be terrible getting him on because he's technologically averse and blah blah blah. He got on Sunday night. He was on in 30 seconds. It was the most perfect test we've ever done. And now he can't get on, it looks like. So.
Yeah, it is so good to see nothing really has changed around here.
No, nothing at all. Nothing at all. So, and again, for everybody watching here, since this kind of the family here, since we're not on the recorded podcast version yet, we're going to do the Christmas week edition Thursday of this week, and that will be the year ender with Greg Carbon and also Rich Thompson of SPC will join us. So that's going to be a fun show. So the year ender that's going to be released to the world next week for Christmas week will be recorded this Thursday at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. So just some housekeeping here.
Sounds like a year bender.
Yeah. Exactly.
But you know what they do at NWA? They had for 1 year they had a drinking game during Carbon's talk.
Yes, I remember that.
What was it?
Whatever the term was of the year.
Yes, that's right.
Tornado outbreak.
Whenever it got repeated, you took a drink.
Yeah, we could do that.
Well, he was up there with a glass of wine, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's the problem when they put his talk next to the reception. That's not smart.
No, it could go right down the tubes. And also, one more note: we're doing the New Year's Week show on Wednesday, January 2nd. So the bottom line is, this is our last Monday night show until January 7th. And that'll be the ham radio show on the 7th. So we're going to be a little off schedule here. But you know what? We have cranked out a WeatherBrains edition every week for going on 13 years.
That's
we started in 2000. We've not missed a single week, which is really remarkable, considering the foolishness that goes on here. At least we're consistent, and people are asking about Brian. Brian Peters. Brian is coming off medical leave, and we're kind of phasing in Brian back into his duties. And understand, Brian has a lot going on. Brian retired from the Weather Service, 15 years ago or more. But Brian has a consulting business on the side. He does television for us for the Weather Factory. He writes blog posts, does videos, WeatherBrains, and we're just trying to phase him in slowly back into this. So we'll try and get Brian back on the show soon. But Brian's doing fine, and he has done some television work, and he tells everybody hello. And to complicate things a little bit, his lovely wife has had a few medical issues to crop up, and he's kind of having to take care of her. So, but anyway, Brian's doing fine. So for those that are asking, thanks a lot for doing that. All right, so everybody's on the line, and Bill has this look on his face like he has gas. Actually, you don't. That's not the look whenever he's trying to get our guest on. So let's see here.
Anybody who's raised kids knows what that look is.
Keith, what's happening in ATL?
Getting ready for Super Bowl. That's been a year-long process or more.
So I guess the Falcons won't be involved, huh?
No, but my Saints will be.
Oh, it's prognostication.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't talk about pro football because John might get a little upset.
I'm suffering
been a rough year.
I'm suffering.
Oh, yeah.
Rough year. Here comes Troy. So I think the gang's all here. So I have never done this before. We're going snow skiing in Colorado next week.
Nice.
I have been to your neck of the woods, Aubrey, in Snowshoe Mountain, West Virginia.
Okay.
To do this.
All right. It's about 2 hours from here.
Yeah, which was just fantastic. We love that, but we have never done this in Colorado, so I might not make it out of there alive. Looks kind of snowy with a trough out there. I'm more interested in the weather than the skiing. Right. I'm the kind of guy that'll just put the skis down and watch the snow come down. It looks awfully snowy next week out there, so
check out the view.
Yeah,
got to be careful about that, James. You might break something you need.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the way I look at it.
When I went to Snowshoe Mountain in West Virginia, I tried snowboarding, and this was like several years ago, and I was overweight, out of shape. That was a total disaster. So this time we're going to...
It's painful if you're... I felt like I had been hit by my own car. It was
that's a show title right there. I felt like I've been hit by my own car.
So I'm going to hang up and get on the account.
Ta-da.
I think we're here.
I think we're here. Yes. And just about on time.
We can hear you, Gary. We can't see you.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
you
need your
can't-
camera turned on.
You
But we
can't
Once we
see
get that.
We don't have to see you, but
camera not
Right.
working.
Most people listen, but it's a lot of people do watch. And let me just say this: we are now at the bottom of the hour, so welcome to those watching on television. This is WeatherBrains. We are about to kick off the show here. It's Monday night, and let me just say this for those of you watching on television: we will not be on Monday night for the next 2 weeks because of the holidays. Obviously, we've got Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. Next week's show will be produced Thursday night. And then for the first week of January, that's going to be a Wednesday night. So our next Monday night show will be on January 7th for those of you watching on the television side. And yeah, Gary, once we get your camera working, we'll get started. And if not, we can go with just the audio because most people do listen. It's about the way it works on the show. About 75% listen and 25% watch. So that's the number there.
You know, this is very strange because I can see all of you, and
and
Can
you
you
have to
see me
see his
now?
office too, James, because it's really cool. So we have to.
can you see me now?
No, still see your avatars on.
Yeah, there's a little gear up in the top of the box up there that says settings, and you can go choose your camera. If you hit that settings button, you have the chance to choose your audio source and your video source, and that might help solve the problem.
Okay, where would that settings thing?
Hover over the top.
Maybe
of
there.
This
Connection.
window.
Little gear button up there.
Okay. Permissions allowed temporarily. Use the camera. Oh, that almost worked. I can see
almost.
Could you see me?
Not yet, but once you click on OK, or I forget the exact dialogue boxes you get there, but you should be close.
Settings, camera permissions. Okay.
That's a
Well, that should be. Well, it says settings, camera permission. Access your camera, which is what I would like to do. Microphone, location, settings.
Yeah, under my settings, I've just got camera and audio in, audio out, and that's about it. I just got 3 options here.
Okay.
And then play test sound down below that.
Well, I have something that says camera and settings, and I hit that, and it doesn't work. Nothing happens. I mean, I get to settings, camera permissions, and golly. This
might be in a Windows box, and I'm more of a Mac guy, so
hover over the top of this window, Gary, where you see all of us, in that hangout. Hover over the top part of it in the middle, and you should see some menu buttons pop up.
Oh, now
it'll say Google on the left, and
I no longer see that. Home. Let me try home. No, new Windows, general, startup.
What we're going to do, we're going to start the
good.
show. We've got like 10 minutes before you'll be on here, so you got 10 minutes to figure this out. And again, if the video doesn't come up, that's cool. So.
Now I can see you. Can you all see me?
No,
but we can hear you.
We hear you fine. Your audio is good. You got no video.
Camera not working. Camera not
typically
working.
what you do is go up into settings, and you choose your camera. You have options if you got more than one camera there.
Okay, it says integrated camera. Is that?
Are there any other
Hangouts can't use the selected camera.
Okay.
Oh.
Now we see you. Now we saw you for a second.
Well, it just worked.
Yeah.
Whatever you did, we see.
Yeah,
you
you're
now, so you're
perfect.
there.
There we go.
So you can see me now.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, let's start this party, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Success, Houston.
Yes.
Let's count this thing down. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hang on, stand by. Let's do this. It's Christmas time. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, it's WeatherBrains. Christmas time, it's here. This is WeatherBrains episode number 674 for the 17th of December, 2018. I love this time of the year, and look who's back. Ladies and gentlemen, our new mom, Kim Cloco McLean, is back from maternity leave. This is the most exciting moment we've had in 3 months. Welcome back, Kim.
Thanks, guys. It's really exciting to be back. I almost feel like it's been years. It's been a long time
Kim.
over here.
We felt like it.
It's been an eternity. So you're such a different person now. So tell us. I know we've chatted in the pre-show, but for those that are just joining us on the podcast side, how is it like being a new mom?
Goodness, yeah. Like I told you guys in the pre-show, I provided a brief overview of the phases of life that I've been through. It feels like I've been, wandering in the desert for years and years, just trying to figure this whole thing out. You're sort of deposited with a child, and then you get to figure out how to keep it alive, and it's really exciting. The first month is just basic survival, and then you gain some extra survival skills in the second month, and the baby does too, and baby starts to get kind of cool, like their mind wakes up and they can be more interactive and do stuff. And now we're at month 3, and she's acting like a little adult now. She spent all day telling my parents watch her during the day, which is wonderful, but she spent all day telling my parents their business. She just talked and talked and talked, and now she's calling plays with my husband watching football. So she went from 2 months to 13 years old or something. I don't know.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, Kim.
Yeah, I shouldn't be surprised that I have a little talker. It's appropriate.
So just remember, when she gets to be about 12, 13, 14, when these creeper boys start showing up, you got a whole bunch of Guidos here that can break legs.
I appreciate
we are
that
watching
very much.
them. Yeah. So, but it is great to have you back, Kim. So welcome back, and Aubrey. So now we have 2 of our young women back on the show. You're not the only one. So
Good.
Yeah.
Happy to have Kim back.
Woohoo!
Yeah. So how are you, Aubrey? What's happening up in Harrisonburg?
Oh, we're just sitting here absorbing more rain. More rain.
Isn't that
More
the
rain.
truth? Oh, it's unbelievable.
It wouldn't be 2018 without another flooding threat, and yet we have another one on the way. Our rivers are just, if the bank is here, the water's here. We actually did not have as much flooding this weekend as I thought we could, even with all the snow melt. But it's at the top. Everything's just at the top. So we're getting a little bit more concerned with more rain for the end of the week. But it was a beautiful day today, a lot of sunshine. It was a nice day to take the bear out on a nice jog this morning. So that was nice.
Plug your Instagram feed again, because you got the greatest Instagram feed. It makes me happy.
It's at WeatherAubs, WXAUBS. And if you follow me, you'll see that yesterday I went to Jamestown, Virginia, the first settlement in the U.S. all the way back to 1607. And it was the first time I had actually been there. Of course, growing up in New England, we always learned about the Pilgrims, and they don't really teach us much about Virginia, what happened before the Pilgrims. But of course, Jamestown kind of set up the Pilgrims. And it was really interesting and eye-opening, and you have to really take a step back of what they possibly could have endured back then without everything and coming over to set up the new world. And it was really eye-opening. So it was really cool. We only had the day there. We drove down and then drove back about a 3-hour drive. But it was dressed up beautifully for Christmas, and we only kind of drove through Williamsburg, but it was beautiful. And I'm hoping my parents buy this timeshare from some friends of theirs so I can go back and visit. So I'm like, Mom, you need to buy it. So hopefully we can go back and visit a little more.
You haven't heard all these commercials on the radio recently, Aubrey, with the people trying to help you get out of your timeshare.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, this is one of the old ones, the deeded ones. So this is something that she could actually pass to me. So
ulterior motives.
Exactly. Very true. Don't mind if I
Troy
do.
Kimmel is deep in the heart of Texas. Troy, what's happening down in Austin?
Not much. Been pretty quiet. Weather not all that bad of late, and kind of watching for the early part of next week, as I think a lot of the central U.S. may be. But around here, got a weak disturbance passing tomorrow, and maybe a shower tomorrow night and early Wednesday. But beautiful weather, highs in the 60s to around 70. each and every day. So
Awesome. And we've got also the man with the best hair in television weather, Dr. John Scott.
yes.
And it's real.
Just fake.
Well, like Aubrey was saying, another weekend with rain here. I measured 1.31, I think, my gauge. So we're about 60 inches for the year.
It's about what we are, 60.27, I think. We're about 3/10 from the 1996 record.
No, we're there. We're at least here in Lancaster. We're there. We got the record. And I was checking the last 4 out of the last 5 weekends. It's rained.
And that's what I need to look at.
Ridiculous.
All right. Bill Murray bringing our guests before they hang up on us and run.
Yeah, they haven't already. We're probably pretty safe. But tonight's first guest panelist, a great friend of the show. He's recently retired meteorologist in charge from the National Weather Service in Birmingham. And Jim, tell us about life after retirement and what you're doing exactly right now.
Trying to not get killed by my wife.
And that's a show. That's a show title.
My wife is really the brains of the family, and she's been a stay-home mom all these years. So I came home, and I actually set up my own LLC. I'm a consultant now, and so I have a home office, and so it's been very fun. Really enjoying it, but and get out to do some stuff on the side. So it's great.
So you're working with the Alabama Emergency Management Agency some, aren't you?
Correct. I have a contract with state EMA. That's correct, Bill.
So it's nice to have you here tonight. And we missed you at the Christmas party tonight, and
Sorry about that. Yep.
We had a good time talking about you. So that was
That's good.
Also tonight, our second guest panelist is a longtime WeatherBrains friend. He's a meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service in Atlanta. Stelly,
Hey.
Keith Spellman. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Bill. Thanks, guys.
Are you ready for some winter weather, Keith?
No.
Oh, it's great to have you here with us
Yeah,
tonight.
thanks.
So what's going on in your life? Anything else going on interesting?
Well, I mean, I'm on 6.5 years as the MIC over here now. So,
Wow.
I know, right?
You have a little more time on your hands this year than you did last year about this time, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. We had that foot snow event last year on the northwest side. So, don't want that again. Of course, we just missed out last week. Just missed out.
Well, we're glad you joined us tonight. We thank you for everything you do. And our guest, WeatherBrain tonight, is a professor of sociology at Northwestern University. His PhD is from Harvard. He's received numerous fellowships. He's probably the smartest person we've ever had on the show. Yeah. Dr. Gary Allen Fine, welcome to WeatherBrains. And
he might have to unmute.
Unmute thyself, Dr. Fine. So find that little mute button at the top and unmute thyself. If you hover at the top of the screen, you'll find the little microphone button there. Okay. There we go. Perfect.
Bingo.
You can hear me?
Bingo.
Now we hear you perfectly.
I may be the smartest person on the show, but I still can't figure out how to work the mute button.
Well, all you're doing is proving our theorem that we had a long time ago. And I told you about it Sunday night, and it's true. The smarter the guest, the more technology averse they are. So that just comes with the territory. But we're still glad that you got through. Now, Gary, I got to focus on a couple of things that are non-weather to start. I know you know, weather's sort of, I wouldn't say it's a sidelight, but it's something you kind of backed into because you basically study a lot of other things. And one of the most interesting people that you studied is Charles Lindbergh. And just share with me for a minute, because, this was an American hero, had this, situation with his baby being kidnapped and killed. He was, the head of the America First Committee, opposing our involvement in the war. But I heard this last weekend that he actually went back to FDR for a commission in World War II and was turned down.
That's correct. By the late 1930s, early 1940s, Lindbergh was so active in the America First movement, the anti-intervention movement, in wanting the United States to stay out of the Second World War, that he was considered persona non grata He had made some statements that were arguably anti-Semitic, and certainly his enemies, of which there were many, used those statements to discredit him. And Roosevelt, by that point, wanted no part of him. He's still a great man, a great hero, but unfortunately, his reputation had taken such a hit in the period leading up to Pearl Harbor that Roosevelt, didn't feel that he represented American values.
Did he ever express in his later years any sort of reticence for what he said and did in those days, or?
Well, the problem with people who were non-interventionists, isolationists, was that Pearl Harbor changed the entire political calculus. That after Pearl Harbor, there were no isolationists, at least in terms of the involvement with Japan and with Germany. And, so Lindbergh, as your example indicates, wanted to be part of the war effort, even though he was very hostile to involvement prior to Pearl Harbor. He was, someone who was on the wrong side of history.
Well, it's an interesting and fascinating thing because he really was an American hero, and then kind of was disgraced.
And the other thing that's interesting for those of you in the South was that Roosevelt would not have gotten all that he wanted were it not for Southern senators. The North, the Midwest, the West, the senators majority were against intervention, not in the South.
That's interesting. Did you ever figure out why, Gary?
Oh, well, part of it is that, there was so much military forts and military personnel in the Southern states that the senators represented them. And it was a way that Southern Democrats could be part of the National Democratic Party, being interventionists, wanting to get involved in the war, when their stance on social issues were outside Northern liberals.
Now that's enough of history brain. Sorry about that, James. But you kind of added weather to your repertoire in the 2007 book Authors of the Storm. How did you come after weather as a problem that you wanted to try to unravel?
Yes. So the viewers, the listeners need to know that what I have done for 45 years is to study group cultures. That's what I'm primarily interested in. And all of my research, Little League Baseball, mushroom collecting, Dungeons and Dragons, chess, all of these different things, they all are places in which small groups gather and create a culture. So it was, I guess, about 2000 that I became interested in how do groups predict the future. And there are a lot of groups that predict the future. Doctors predict the future. You go to the doctor and he'll tell you, what the likelihood is that you will have a heart attack or that this particular problem will be solved and so forth. He has to predict the future, but he has no access to the future. Weather forecasters are very much like that. They don't know what the future is going to be, but at the same time, they have that obligation in telling people. And I became very interested in that problem. How do groups gather together and tell people what is going to happen down the road?
So Kim, this was a great night for you to come back to the show because I think you told me about this book. Talk about this book in relation to the social science side of meteorology as far as you see it.
For me, to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I admit to having only gotten to read some of the book, and I've heard it described in other settings where the field has been discussed and advances in the field have been discussed. I think that it's a sort of hallmark book for describing the culture of our field, and it's the first real attempt to dig in this way and to understand that there's a the science doesn't just happen on its own, and there's a culture propelling it, and I don't know. I think in there's a chance for self-reflection that meteorologists will really enjoy about it.
I think that's exactly right. I was telling Chris Starr in the MIC at the National Service in Birmingham tonight. We were sitting at dinner. Because Gary, you go on for several paragraphs, couple of pages about simple things that we do day in and day out, like changing the forecaster before us, who was on the shift before, or this forecast that is. Has evolved over time. When we sit in the hot seat or the chair and we have to change that forecast, there's a process that goes on for that. Do you remember writing about that in the book?
Oh, absolutely.
Little bit.
Yes. I mean, there's a politics of it, so what I found at this, Jim probably knows pretty well, it's the Chicago office, that, you wanted to wait until the other forecaster is out the door before you change his forecast. And you want to avoid yo-yoing forecasts. In other words, the 4 o'clock forecaster comes in, makes a forecast, then the midnight forecaster changes it, then the guy at 8 a.m. changes it again. That's not good. And that was one of the things that the forecasters in Chicago and the other two places, would always talk about. And they'd be very offended if the next person changed their forecast too quickly.
So that's interesting. Dr. John, you talk about chasing the forecast. What do you mean by that?
Well, trying to keep up with the changing environment by changing your forecast, but in the long run, you can't catch up. So you end up chasing a number. Mm-hmm. I remember years ago watching some of the forecasts coming out of, some of the outlooks coming out of the Storm Prediction Center, and I could almost tell who wrote the outlook based on what time of day it was and what the content of the outlook was. And I'm sure both Jim and the rest of us can remark on that as well, that there are certain individuals who will come in and make a forecast regardless who was there before them, and will change it.
Yes.
Well, every Monday morning, James has no problem with changing my forecast. So I don't know what the politics are, but I think it's generally.
No, here's my problem. I changed my forecast at 7 o'clock in the morning. The one I wrote 6 hours ago. So yeah, it happened.
No politics involved there for sure. So Gary, how did you? Well, I mean, obviously Chicago was probably an easy pick for you to be one of the offices that you studied. And it turned out to be an interesting office from a lot of standpoints.
Absolutely fascinating office. As someone who is not particularly bureaucratic, in the period, I'm not talking about Jim when he took over and how things evolved, but under the forecaster, the chief meteorologist when I was there, there was a lot of joking. There was a lot of suspicion of bureaucracy, of government. They would joke about them being scientists and not being bureaucrats. So I wanted to choose another office that had a very different mindset. And so I chose another old office that was nearby Chicago. I went up there maybe for about 10 days and looked at how different office cultures matter. And this was an office, that other office was one that they took their government responsibilities seriously. And then I also chose a third office, and the third office was a spin-out office, one of the new offices that was created in the late 1990s. So I wanted to see how culture was created when there wasn't this kind of history as there was in Chicago. The Chicagoans are always talking, we were in office in 1870. or thereabouts. I'm sure Jim knows the exact date. And, so we know it all. We've seen it all. We're the experts. And because they felt that way, they perhaps sometimes missed some of the things that other offices would have recognized. In other words, they said, we've seen it all. Nothing much is going to happen. This has happened before, and so forth. And this kind of attitude actually led to, one of the, National Weather Service tragedies, the Plainfield tornado, in which the Chicago office did not properly warn for this level 5 tornado, which killed, I think, 33 people in one of the suburbs of Chicago.
And that left a mark on that office for a long time, didn't it, Gary?
Yes, it did.
And Jim, it probably did into your tenure later on, right?
Yeah, so I retired from here in Birmingham, but I was the MIC in Chicago from 2003 to 2005. And Gary, good to see you again. I haven't seen Gary in a lot of years since
Right.
I was in Chicago. And to put a little background on it, so the modernization of the Weather Service had occurred in the mid-90s, and you went from the Weather Service forecast office, pretty much one per state, and then a bunch of surrounding Weather Service offices. But the big WSFO had the responsibility pretty much for the entire state. We're talking about typing out the zone forecast by hand, all that. And then the culture started shifting, and now we're getting Doppler radar. We're getting used to using the 88D and the internet. We're still not involved in web services per se at the Weather Service. AWIPS is coming out. We're going from typing a lot of products to now using the gridded data, which the NDFD, which was very clunky software at the time. So as Gary said, it was very challenging to be a manager during this time, because you're not only dealing with the individual culture that we'll talk about of the office and individuals, but now you're also dealing with transitioning into this modernization with a lot of things that aren't going smoothly. So it was a very challenging time.
Mm-hmm. I want to just chime in and mention that I was young when that tornado happened. I was a kid growing up in the Chicago suburbs, and that was actually the tornado that got me into weather. And it's so interesting, the culture, almost the hubris of the office, had a profound impact on me and on many of the people growing up in the area, to just feel that sense of overwhelming vulnerability, and to hear the stories of the people who'd been out shopping, and then the building they were in just collapsing around them with no warning, and the people who died there. I was outside playing, and I didn't know what they were, but I saw mammatus clouds, and I was in a forest preserve. If it had been in my area instead of Plainfield, obviously I was very close. If it had been in my suburb, I wouldn't have stood that much of a chance either. And just I recognized that. I was 7 years old and I knew that. And I wanted better for myself, and I wanted better for other people. That tragedy just broke my heart and shaped my whole career. So it's incredible how these things have ripple effects, and we can, there are people behind the forecast, and then there are people that they're communicating with, and in some cases failing to communicate with. And there's that interplay that just carries forth our whole field. So interesting how it all works.
Well, let me add to what Gary was saying, is that it's very true. When you went from a WSFO responsible for the entire state to now, there wasn't as much collaboration going on as there is now in the Weather Service, and Keith and I can both talk about that we've gotten so much better. But you were an island, and there's still the island effect that exists in a lot of WFOs today, because it's a culture of you're pretty much catering to your county warning area. But back then it was it was really hard changing the culture.
I got an interesting that I'm going to go back a little bit, talking about chasing the forecast, guys. And we got Keith and Jim. Good to see y'all again. Keith, is that anything that in a local forecast office, a WFO now chasing the forecast, updating is that anything that's talked about at all? I mean, when a new shift comes, how soon they change a forecast? Is that anything that's discussed?
Honestly, it varies a little bit, but I think we call it whack-a-mole now, where you're you're updating the forecast more frequently with the grids process, and then as you see the grids start to go out of whack, you whack them back down and copy the latest and adjust the forecast to what the trend is going. So, that's the name we call it, whack-a-mole. But it certainly has changed from the way it used to be, because it used to be a 6 to 12 hour process. Now we're into the hourly update time frame. It's when we're getting into the fine scale of things. And so you've really at least taken a person and started focusing them in on, the current, moving into the short-term process. But that has a whole mindset change. And so when you're going hour by hour by hour, at least in the short term, you don't necessarily chase. You start to see it more maybe in the 2 to 5 to 7 day range, where you might start to get into that a little bit. But in the short term, it's not so much like that.
Okay. Just kind of wondered what kind of response. Occasionally on the outside, we'll see a forecast package that'll be amended, within a couple of hours after a shift change. And you kind of wonder about that and you look at it closely. So just wondering.
Well, yeah. And honestly, Troy, that probably plays into a confidence thing. A shift may not have been confident to do X, whatever the models were saying. Oh, I don't feel as confident. The next person comes in and goes, oh, well, I can't believe they didn't do that, and I'm going to go ahead and change it. So, yeah, it does happen. Yes, it does happen.
But it also, I assume, James, I mean, this is also happening on the broadcast side as well to some degree.
It is, and it's been going on for a while, and it's going to keep on going on. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Gary, you mentioned in the book about the importance of words, and Keith, I'll ask you, Jim, your recent experience too. Are words less important to the National Weather Service than they were before the NDFD and forecast products that are generated by computer to a great degree? Of course, knowing there's a human behind the grids, but are words less important on the day-to-day forecast? And I'll ask you.
Well, I mean, a lot of the words are derived by formatters, so the words are right. Generated for us. We pay, for the most part, pay close attention to what goes into the gridded database, which we know is going to create the words. But I don't know that everybody's on the same page with that across the board.
But our words, Dr. Scala, become important because a lot of times we're the intermediary on our side, interpreting the forecast.
You mean for the media?
Yeah.
Oh, I know. And we talked about this earlier. How often have someone contacts the station and says, why didn't you issue a warning? Well, that's not the media's responsibility. Yeah. That's the National Weather Service. And I'm surprised how many times that's a shock to whoever called in or wrote an email.
They're from Oklahoma. Just kidding.
Yep. No, you're not. Well, let me ask you a question real quick, Keith, while I've got you here for a second. Are we ever, and this is inside the weeds for the people mainly here, but are we ever going to get rid of the zone forecast product? I mean, that the gridded, it's so easy to click for a location and that sort of thing. I assume that weather radio is one of those things that's going to require the issuance continuous by county of those zone forecasts, but just thought I'd ask.
Well, I mean, it took us 30 years to get rid of the all caps. So
yeah. There you go. You got it.
Moving right along. Progress. I want to swing back really quickly to I thought the conversation that was raised about changes to the forecast was a really interesting one. So Gary, you mentioned one set of factors, the interoffice cultural factors, and so interpersonal relationship factors. I'm interested in your perspective and that of everybody on this panel. I think everyone's felt these pressures. what do you there could be a number of different factors that actually weigh on a forecaster's mind when they decide to make a change in the forecast or to withhold. So for example, with the Harvey service assessment, I had the chance to be a part of that team, and that was a case where there was a rapidly intensifying hurricane, and we had local offices that were making forecasts, but there were also national centers. There's the relationship in the Weather Service between local offices, their surrounding offices, and then also these national centers that have sort of a purview over different aspects of the forecast. And there were questions about, well, the Hurricane Center has their track, their sort of best guess track here. The Weather Prediction Center now is sort of having to find themselves beholden to that. Their rainfall forecasts have to sort of follow that. And the local offices had to make some judgment calls about following all of that. And then, there was a lot that was going on, so many dynamics. What factors did you observe in addition to this inner office, but looking outside? And then you can think about, well, do they want to, what do they think the public wants? Is there a factor there too? Could you? I think you might be muted. You look like you're very excited to talk about this. Though. With your hands unmute. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, now you should hear me. Okay, it really is fascinating because not only do you have internal office decision making, but you had, at least when I was doing this research in the early 2000s, the connection between offices. And as I write in the book, there was this real tension between the Chicago office and one of their nearby spin-up offices, right? And the Chicagoans didn't really trust these young people, as they thought of them, this new office from a little bit west of the city. And so they were always joking about this other office, predicting the end of the world. And there was this one occasion on which a forecaster in this office, I call it Flowerland, predicted a 6-inch wall of water. And so they would constantly joke about what a crazy office this other office is. They also were having to deal with the Severe Storm Center in Norman. And there are some offices. I spent 2 weeks down in Norman, Oklahoma with the storm forecasters in tornado season. And they would tell me that, each office had to be treated differently. But the Chicago office, you had to be very cautious with, because they would say, we know better than you.
Forget about it.
And other offices, would love it. So, there's a lot of things going on culturally as well as scientifically.
And let me say that Gary was way ahead of his time as far as social science that now we're all using as meteorologists, TV, other media, the Weather Service. And so, but I have to tell this quick story, is that Gary graciously allowed me to see a transcript before it was published. And I read it and I lost a whole bunch of sleep that night. I had there's a saying, the good old days weren't always that good. And the Chicago office, especially after the Plainfield tornado, had a horrible reputation. And some of it was brought on by themselves, and some of it was some other things. So I actually went to Gary and said, you can't publish this. And I'm thinking to myself, who in the world at the regional or headquarters level allowed this guy to come in and expose these? I mean, it'd be like somebody coming in a reality show and reporting everything. So not only did I read it, I let the staff read the transcript. And I don't even know if Gary knows this, but we had a meeting and they were angry, hurt, felt betrayed by Gary. And that was a very common emotion. And then all of a sudden, one forecaster stood up and said, Gary did not put a word in here that's not true. And that, and then it got me thinking, whoever at the region and headquarters that allowed Gary to come in, it was the most brilliant move ever, because when somebody from the outside said, really, people really like this? They said, we don't want to be like this. And it absolutely helped me to start changing the culture of the office for a short time.
So I have to tell you the story of how I got accepted. I had called the Chicago office and spoke to the MIC, and who was a wonderful man. I dearly love him. And he said, well, come out to the office and let's talk. So he didn't know me. I didn't know him. I was very nervous. What am I going to say to persuade him that I can spend time at this office? So I get there, I come into the office, and the first thing he says to me is, well, when do you want to start? He doesn't ask me about my research. He just says, come on in. I mean, he doesn't check with central headquarters. He just lets me in. And, so I am very grateful to him. I know that people in the office were somewhat distressed because they felt that some of the things that I was emphasizing were not the things that they thought were most important. But I'm a sociologist, after all. I look at group cultures. I'm not a meteorologist. I always loved getting to that office. It was always so much fun. The people there are, there were individual odd personalities, to be sure. Jim knows some of these people. But I had a great deal of fun and a great deal of respect for these people. I would have been happy to go out to the office, even though I would have been beaten up, at least verbally, and explained what I was saying, why I was saying it. I just have to mention, the first day I was there, this was after I spoke to the MIC there, and I was sitting around with them, and one of the forecasters was talking about the new AWIPS system, which he hated. He hated throughout really all of the 18 months that I was there. The forecasters called it crapware. That was their term. That's all. And what he said struck me. I stuck with me for the whole time. He said, the National Weather Service is stealing our words. That is, for him, what was important as a meteorologist was that he got to write the forecast. That is why the book is called Authors of the Storm, because he and other forecasters felt that really what they did was they took the scientific data and then they wrote this literature, in a sense, this very formulaic literature, but it was their words. And headquarters in Washington were, because of the new technology, was taking what they considered the heart of their professionalism.
And let me add on to that real quick. So that there was a number of individuals like that, Gary.
Yes, I know.
Right. But to the most vocal proponent of it, I said, okay, you're in charge of making up the words that you want to go into this. And I said, in a year, you will not be allowed to edit the ZFP. And I had union grievances threatened against me because exactly that reason. These words are mine. You cannot touch my words.
Yes. And so that's what we were just talking about then, Keith. The words are less important in the forecast anymore.
Well, right, but it's evolving into interpretation for decision makers, right? So we're taking the words of the forecast, and the culture is evolving into taking those words and converting them to something useful for a decision maker to make an important decision from, right? So now it's not just simply a forecast, it's more than that. And that's the evolution that's going on right now.
Well, that's really exciting, Kim, at this point, that there's another quantum leap coming here in decision support and taking, we've gone from words to data, more science, to, going into the forecast, more efficiency going into the forecast, to now this next leap of service, beyond just making the forecast. So Gary, that's that. Even a blind squirrel gets a nut, but every once in a while. But now I see why you called the book what you called it. So that makes
right. There was the logic, and there certainly is this public demand. I was there when forecasters were talking about, it was Memorial Day. There was a chance of rain. Should they spoil people's picnic and predict rain? Or should they say that it's going to be sunny and people would be disappointed if it started to rain? What was the choice they were going to make? I mean, it wasn't like 80% chance of rain. They wouldn't have done that. But I think it was about 30%. And in Chicago, on an average day, there's a 30% chance of rain. So it was, there was some probability of picnics being spoiled. But should the forecasters spoil that picnic in advance?
But Gary, we as broadcasters, we even see that to some degree. The broadcasters, I've been on the air before and said, Gary, on a good day, what a beautiful day it is, and I'll have someone turn around and call me and say it's not a beautiful day. We need rain here for agriculture.
Right.
I say it's a bad day. So you're exactly right. It really makes you think about this sort of thing.
And James, we do that a lot with our forecast. You do, it's not going to rain the whole day. It's not going to rain everywhere. It's not, it's communicating that's really important.
Right. And I will say, if we have a big event, let's say a race at the Talladega Super Speedway, a football game, or 100,000 people are going to show up. If it's 5 to 7 days out, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. 5 to 7 days out. I'm not just going to go in and say it's going to rain and rain and rain and rain. I try and be as positive as I can, but yet at the same time, I'm paid to tell people what the weather's going to do. And once we get within 48 hours, I'll shoot straight at that point.
So that's an important nugget right there, ladies and gentlemen. That's why you listen to the show, is insight like that, because that's true. That's very true. And that's right.
I was told, I'm not sure, I didn't collect this data, but I was told that there are more forecasts for blizzards the week after Christmas than the week before Christmas. Yet the number of blizzards is exactly the same.
Wow. So there's some optimism bias there.
Why should that be? Because if it's the week before Christmas and you're a forecaster, you predict a blizzard and you're wrong, there's all hell to pay. Every department store owner will be calling and say, why did you do this? Because this is the time of year that we make money.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm so glad you've raised this point, because this is yet another factor, right, for influencing what forecasters are trying to say. And what you guys are talking about, this grand change of the words, it's going from crafting a description of the hazard to crafting a description of the impacts, and getting to know your community and understanding that you wield a power over the communities that you're serving. That's a completely different level and a different kind of responsibility. It sounds like that's something that did you remark on that transition in your book? I'm curious.
I talk about that. I am not a meteorological researcher, but I was interested in the way that forecasters talked about their occupation and the way in which they saw the pressures acting on them.
And Kim, I'm showing my age here, but don't forget, back then it was things like AFD, ZFP, SPS, special weather statement, a warning. Okay, there wasn't this, what's the impacts, it wasn't this support services going on back then. It was just, let's push out our products because we have very strict guidelines and to follow, and this is what you're going to get. And by God, you need to know what the weather service is saying, not the other way around. That was a culture back then.
Kim, I'll jump in. I'll say this to your point and to Gary's point. I know from experience here in Atlanta that if there is going to be a winter storm in the Atlanta metro, there is cause for hesitation in the forecasters to want to pull that trigger to put out a watch or a warning for the metro, because they know what the repercussions are if they do that. Versus, say, in the northern mountains or whatever, there's not necessarily the same hesitation in doing so. So that certainly plays into a forecaster's psyche.
Right.
Mhm. One of the interesting challenges you guys have identified in some of what you're saying is, impacts are so not they're not universal, right? Impacts are so based in whatever population you're talking about. So you can say, oh, it's a beautiful day, but the farmers, it's not a beautiful day for us, and you're forgetting us. You all feel this, I'm sure. I mean, the broadcast community, you get on the TV every day and have to pick your words to, who you're communicating to about the impact. Can you talk a little bit about those pressures and, in this new era of talking about impacts? How have you navigated that?
Well, my focus was on the Weather Service office rather than the broadcast meteorologists. But I think every broadcast meteorologist needs to develop a connection with the city. And, every city has one or maybe two weather forecasters who are culturally central. In Chicago, it's Tom Skilling. Tom Skilling is the guy that everyone goes to. In Oklahoma City, at least it used to be, Gary England. And every city has this person who is the font of wisdom, the source of trust.
It used to be Jim Stefkovich here, but now it's James Spann.
Yeah. I got the crown when Jim retired.
Sure. Getting deep.
So you talk about institutional history and collective memory in the book.
Yes.
And those terms are really important as a sociologist. Talk about what they mean to us as meteorologists, and how talk about moving office to office potentially being counterproductive to that here, and then let Jim and Keith sound off.
There was the saying when I was doing this research that forecasters are like salmon, that they want to return to where they were born. They want to go upriver. And there is a sense of that where you learned about weather is where you feel most comfortable, where you have an intuitive knowledge of what the weather conditions are. And that if you transfer, and particularly if you transfer from one region to another region, you lose that intuition. In addition, at least it used to be said, I don't know if this is still true, where the Weather Service had, I think, 4 different regions of the country, and that each of the regions had its own culture. But there was a Midwestern culture for the Midwestern region, and a West culture, and they were different. And they were different in part because they were dealing with different hazards. The West isn't really dealing with tornadoes, isn't dealing with hurricanes for the most part, but is dealing with fires. The Midwest, tornadoes, Southeast, hurricanes, Northeast, blizzards. And so that is part of the local traditions. If you move from a blizzard region to a fire region, you have a lot of retraining to do.
So how important is local knowledge and experience? I know, Jim, your staff in Birmingham, you had, a lot of young people who joined who had experience in the local area. How important was that in the interview process for a forecaster?
Not in the interview process per se, although I did hire, because they were just the best qualified, from folks who grew up in Alabama, went to South Alabama or surrounding universities. It wasn't that you can start teaching when they have the fundamental skills of meteorology. It's just all they bring to the surrounding parts of the office. Maybe you need somebody who's good in warnings. You need somebody who's good in outreach. You got to make all the puzzle fit. what I have found fascinating, and I don't know if it was my lack of leadership as an MIC, but we did a couple times Myers-Briggs, which is you go through of what makes you tick, what makes other ticks, and it was like people would understand each other, and it was like, oh, that's the way you're thinking about things. And that would last for about 6 months. And that's not just a Birmingham. I think that's my opinion. That's universal. Because as physical scientists, you're so immersed in actually trying to get the meteorology right that it's just a very complicated issue.
So Keith, do your meteor? I'm sorry, Troy.
I was just going to ask. I don't know why I'm going to ask this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, is there such thing as a gut forecast? Is there such thing as a gut forecast, a feeling you get through experience in a certain market?
Gary?
Well, that's certainly what the forecasters told me. They and I have a lot of quotations in the book that they just felt that this was going to be like this other event that they had lived through. That the weather was coming together like something that happened maybe 5 years ago, and that allowed them, at least in their own mind, to be more confident in making forecasts.
Wow.
Isn't that what we call pattern recognition?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. Right. But it's distinct from the pure science. It's distinct from the models. It's distinct from the equations. It's experience-based.
So it is gut forecasting in a sense, right? I mean, it is through experience, through being in that area.
That's correct. The models are great. People back when I was doing this research would joke about, maybe at some point we'll just have one office in the country and they will make all the forecasts and it will be just as good as having 122 local offices. Right. And there's obviously a certain amount of truth to that. People in Washington, when I spent a couple of weeks there out in eastern suburbs of Washington, would talk about that. Gee, our models are getting better and better and better, and there will be a time at which there will be no value added from the local office.
And that's called the Weather Channel. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. We're actually starting to approach that.
So talk about that for a minute, Keith. That has some truth to it, doesn't it?
So yeah, couple of things. You were first talking about the forecasters. For example, I just hired 4 journey forecasters with a total combined experience of 9 years. Wow. And I have a senior forecaster with 45 years of experience. And so that coming full circle back to the discussion we had earlier about chasing the forecast or shift to shift consistency, when you've got a grad student out of OU with 2 years of experience following up a 45-year veteran senior forecaster, obviously they're going to see things a little bit differently. And you're going from shift to shift to shift on consistency. But to get back to the discussion here, we've got over 100 computer model ensembles now that are running every few hours. It's almost mind-boggling the amount of data that we can look at constantly to stay in touch with the forecast and evolve. And now the models are becoming more and more complicated, adding more and more layers to them. There's going to become a point, and we can thank technology. The science hasn't really changed, but the technology has enabled us to get to this point. And so we're trying to chase the technology and maintain some awareness and things going on. And that's the challenge we're seeing in the forecasting realm now. But to do with a gut forecast, well, if I'm going to go with a gut forecast in today's forecasting world, I've got to get, in my case, I've got 8 neighbors. I've got to get 8 neighbors to agree with my gut forecast. Otherwise, I stand out on an island.
Wow. So you mentioned in the book, Gary, the implicit deference structure. How does that play into what we're talking about here between offices and inside an office?
Right. Well, as we were saying at the outset, there is a sense among forecasters that they need to treat others with respect. Now, that doesn't always happen in terms of how people conceived of it. So that there was this one instance in the Chicago office where two forecasters, I wouldn't say they came to blows, but they were clearly upset. One of them was particularly upset because he had said in a forecast that I think that there was very little chance of rain. And this other forecaster said, there's no clouds within 300 miles of us. Why are you saying there's very little chance rather than no chance? And the forecaster who was being criticized was very offended by that. So there is this sense that we should be on the same team. And it's also why yo-yoing forecasts are harmful for the culture in the office. And of course, the relationship between offices can be one of deference, or it can be one of mistrust.
So was that forecast a result of a verification issue then, Gary, and maybe out to Jim and to Keith? How much of our problem is a verification situation?
Well, it's as Jim probably knows, verification was not taken very seriously in the Chicago office. I contrasted the Belvedere office, as I called it, with the Chicago office. They had to post verification statistics, and the Belvedere office posted it right in the center of the office. Everyone who entered the office would see their verification. The Chicago office posted the verification in a hallway in the back. No one would see it. And in part because they didn't take it very seriously. They didn't see that as being a measure of how good they were as meteorologists. Again, it was the central office, the administration, telling these experts, this old office, what they should be doing. And it wasn't taken so well in that office. I'm sure that, I think Jim was brought in part because headquarters in Washington wanted to see what they could do about creating a new culture. I don't think it had anything to do with me or my research, because my research hadn't been published at that point. But certainly it had to do with the sense that the Chicago office was on its own and not really part of the national team, even though I think they were really quite good, from what I could tell. But they had this sense of we're special.
And so there was an effort to bring science into the mix then. And Jim, you've seen the addition of the Sioux and all those things. That was not accepted very readily back when you were doing the research, was it, Gary? This idea of a Sioux and bringing science into the process.
It was accepted in the Belvedere office quite readily. It was taken in the Chicago office as part of their joking culture. I think one of the things that perhaps some of the local forecasters found uneasy was that, I studied group cultures, and they had a very humorous culture. They're always joking with each other in Chicago and joking about them being scientists, that we're, but doing it in a joking way, that, they would meet in the garage of one of the forecasters, and they would do what they call mad scientist experiments. It's just a bunch of guys, and it was all men who were the forecasters in Chicago when I was doing the research. They would go and they would have a microwave oven, and they would put things in the oven, and they would, do various kinds of experiments. And then they would come back and talk about it, the next time they were all in the office.
And there was some great meteorologists at the Chicago office, as Gary is alluding to. But again, this was all new. WCM, Sioux, it was all new positions.
Yes.
And it was, you're making it up as you go along. And as far as Bill, you asked about the verification, I'd rather grow beans and count them. So it was kind of like, what can we do to move forward as an office and everything? Now, verification has its place, and Keith can talk to it, but I know my last few years of the Weather Service, there was very little emphasis placed on verification. Now, we put our own emphasis on it for severe weather warnings that you all have talked about a lot, because that was something we definitely wanted to improve.
Yeah.
But forecasts and all that, no.
Right. And Jim had a great success. Jim, we had a tornado. I don't remember the location, but I know you do. It was, I think, 2003, maybe. That was EF3 tornado, right? And they got it right. They got it in, I think, 20 minutes in advance. They predicted it. And, there was a sense that the ghost of Plainfield had been lifted. That, now the Chicago office could be trusted because of this, because of getting it right. And then I think that was when you were meteorologist in charge.
Yeah, but Gary, don't give me too much credit. Again, it's a team effort. And seriously, your book had a lot to do with changing the culture and a positive effort. So the skill was there, but the culture wasn't there. So you helped facilitate a cultural change that made the office better in all aspects.
I think you've introduced a really interesting topic here. What makes for a good office culture, I think, is a question I'd love to hear from Gary and from our Weather Service folks. You've talked about the importance of rallying around measures together, but you also talked earlier about how we're transitioning to this IDSS world where we don't really have measures to rally around, at least not yet. So in this new world where we're focused on impacts, what makes for a good office and office culture? What do you rally around?
Well, that's a difficult question for me as a non-meteorologist, as someone who is looking at the Weather Service from the outside to say. I think there are advantages to each system. But the Belvedere office, as I call it, was very top-down. It was very organizationally precise. They did a lot of evaluations, a lot of meetings. The Chicago office was a bunch of very bright, talented men who were off doing their own thing, in some conjunction with each other. I don't want to make it too dramatic, but they thought of themselves as, I am the man in the hot seat, as opposed to we are the team in the hot seat.
Hit it on the head, Gary. That's when I hire, I am looking solely for people who can play well in team environments. Exactly what I'm looking for. I can train you to do anything in operations if you're willing to be a team player. So that's the number one thing I look for in hiring.
So that's what's important then, Kim, would you say, is this concept of having a team? Is that the important consideration in whether a culture is good or bad inside a Weather Service office? Jim, comment on that?
Well, I think, it has to be team effort, because we're all individuals and we have our biases and all that, but you've got to come together for the team. And that's where I think, even not only within the office itself, but that's why the collaboration has gotten so much better between offices to a large degree, because it's not my forecast. It's not Birmingham or Atlanta's forecast. It's the National Weather Service forecast. And I think that collaboration continues to grow. So it's across the board as far as a team effort.
Kim will probably love this, but Gary, you said in the book that truth is a social phenomenon. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that, there's the weather is real, right? And if there's going to be a flood, it will flood your house or it won't. There is that obdurate reality, as we sociologists call it. Weather can't be denied, can't be explained away. On the other hand, when I say the truth is social, the way it is produced within social organizations. Forecasters working together or choosing not to work together. a culture of teamwork or a culture of individuality, a culture in which local offices communicate with each other or ignore each other, an organization in which decisions are made in Washington and people simply have to accept them without complaining, or a system in which the offices get to contribute to what is the National Weather Service policy. I mean, the National Weather Service has the great advantage of it being one of the federal agencies that is most trusted, maybe the federal agency that is liked best, that is trusted most. And so it is very important that the Weather Service keeps that trust.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And Keith, we see all the time politics enters the world of weather forecasting. You've seen it, in your office with your governor. I mean, Jim, you saw it with the birth of Huntsville. Key West was an office built out of politics, I guess, too. Are there other examples of where politics comes into play with the day-to-day efforts of the National Weather Service?
Well, I know certainly the Huntsville office is the case in point, in which, a congressman said, I want an office in my district.
Yeah.
And we're still living with it, James.
Yeah. No, Bill, I gave that example earlier. Do I put Atlanta Metro in a winter storm watch or do I not? You have explicit data that may suggest that you should, but a lot of times forecasters are sitting there deciding, you know what? Maybe we have a time. I can give it another run. Let me kick it to the next shift and put all the pressure on the next group coming in. How many times does that happen? I know, Jim, you could probably say a gazillion times this happened, right? It happens.
And listen, every organization. Sorry, go ahead, James.
I was going to say we have the problem with football. Let's say we've got the national championship game on television here. You were just praying. Oh, please do not pull the trigger on a tornado warning. Please don't do it. And the question is, does that come into play? Where it really shouldn't, but it does.
Right, so James, what would you do? Because this came up tonight at dinner, and the CBS affiliate here had to deal with 2 tornado warnings during the SEC championship game.
Ooh.
What would you have done if that game had been on ABC that day and it had featured Alabama or Auburn?
Well, I'm blessed now because we have 3 TV stations here, and we would make arrangements to do weather on one station, football on the other station. We've got a pretty good arrangement here, so I would probably do weather on the main station and put football on 21 or 68. So the other guys don't have that luxury, but we do.
Yeah, there was something about like somebody with an RPG standing outside the station if they didn't take the crawl, because all they did was the crawl. They didn't even go wall to wall, and it was covering up the yard marker. Yeah. And apparently they got death threats over that. Oh yeah, which is just crazy.
Right. But that's the one thing we wonder if the local weather service offices consider that in their decision making process, because we do get death threats. Yeah. I mean, it's brutal. Do they consider, what we have to go through if it's a marginal situation? Look, if it's a big, obviously a supercell with a debris ball and a TDS, you got to do that. But if it's a marginal situation, do you hold off because football is on television? I don't know. I don't know what I would love to be a fly on the wall at a weather service office.
So you see the TV Guide TV ratings on the side of the monitor, sort of like the calendar side monitors there, that you see there. James, let's talk logistics for a second, because I have to go at 10 o'clock because my 14-year-old becomes 15 years old tomorrow, and his birthday party's tonight at 10 o'clock. Ooh. For me personally.
Listen, we've got, I see, now Aubrey's got to go, but I see Troy and Dr. John. We have 2 professional broadcasters here, so we're good.
Well, I have just 7 more pages of questions and notes, so I think this will become a recurring show. I want to say goodbye to you.
But tell you what, let's do this.
Let me say goodbye to him real quick, James, and I'll jump out. Y'all go do the rest of the show, and I'll go do my birthday. But Gary, thank you so much. I enjoyed your book so much, enjoyed meeting you, enjoyed talking to you.
Bill, it was a pleasure being on the show.
Awesome.
Thank you.
James, take it away.
All right, we're going to take a break here. We're going to do Tony Rice. We'll come back with the weather roundup. We'll have some email from Aubrey. Aubrey, have you got time to do that here in about 2 minutes?
Because I've got about 4 minutes before I have to go into the studio.
Okay, well, let's roll Tony Rice. We'll come back with the email segment next, and we'll do picks of the week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
You might have heard about Comet 46P Wirtanen, also known as the Christmas Comet. It's one of the brightest comets in years, and it made its closest approach to Earth last night. You may have also heard that it's visible to the naked eye this week. Yeah, about that. Magnitude scale. Smaller the number, the brighter the object. This is also a logarithmic scale, so each jump corresponds to a change of about 2.5 times in brightness. The full moon's a negative 13, Jupiter clocks in at about a negative 2, and the brightest stars within the Big Dipper are around positive 2. Over the summer, 46P Wirtanen was seen at a magnitude 8, which requires a moderate-sized telescope to be able to see. But the latest observations this weekend recorded by the University of Maryland put observations around a magnitude 4. For comparison, Halley's Comet peaked around magnitude 2 back in 1986. Now, Mag 4 objects are generally naked eye visible from rural areas and possibly from outer suburbs that don't have a lot of light pollution. But magnitude measurements don't tell the whole story. The nature of comets makes them a little more challenging to spot. Comets are surrounded by a coma, or an envelope of gas and dust that's formed as ice boils off. As the comets make their way closer to the sun, they heat up more, and the coma spreads out over a larger and larger area, making them much less of a point of light and much more diffuse. Think of it this way. It's like seeing oncoming headlights driving on a clear night versus a foggy one. The brilliant green images you may have seen of the comet were photographed with long exposures, and or by combining multiple images. If you get the chance to see it, it will look much more like a green smudge. A pair of binoculars will help bring in a little more light, clearing it up some, but this is not likely something you'll be able to spot from urban areas. So, for those of you with darker skies, your best opportunity to see 46P Wirtanen is once the moon sets around 1 a.m. local time. Look north 3 stars in Orion's belt. Then look to the right for the Orin and the Bull. December 7th. The comet is about 12 degrees up and to the right, about the width of your outstretched fist. Will be another 3 degrees up and to the right each night this week until it's alongside the bright star Capella over the weekend. For the latest finder charts, visit wirtanen.astro.umd.edu. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
All right, time for the weekly dive into the good old email inbox to see what's in there.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right, so we are opening the inbox. I don't know whether to start with this or end with this. We're going to start with this so we can kind of get this out of the way. Many of you may have heard over the last couple of days, the Fox 2 meteorologist Jessica Starr, who passed away from Detroit. She was a mother. She had 2 children. Beautiful, talented meteorologist who did tragically kill herself. There have been a couple articles written about her, about the ties to possibly LASIK. We don't know, only you can speculate at this point, but we do know that she has a husband that is without a wife now, leading up to the holidays, and 2 children are without a mother now, leading up to Christmas. So our thoughts and prayers are with her family at a very, very, very difficult time. And I'm sure her coworkers are still grieving at a very difficult time. So very big tragedy.
And, you know, a lot of people, Kim, have been trying, like Rick Smith, have been trying to get us to open up about mental health issues.
Yeah.
And let me just say this, every family is touched by mental health problems. I don't care who you are. You might try and hide it, sweep it under a rug. That's not going to help the situation. We have to be more open and talk about it. And we don't know the circumstances. And I agree, you know, you read some of this stuff. We don't know what happened, but obviously there was an issue here. And it's just a reminder that we need to openly discuss this. And I'm not so sure we need to be tooting our horns as meteorologists. Oh, it's so hard. It's not about us. This is a problem across every occupation, every family. And we just need to push people to numbers where maybe they can get help, because there's probably a chance somebody listening to this show right now needs help.
And this is, I think, maybe in meteorology or in broadcasting, this is one of those fields where maybe it can be masked a little more than in some other fields, because you do have to put on a lot of makeup. You have to put on a brave face every day. You have to put on a smile every day. So you can sometimes suffer in silence. And so you never know what someone is actually going through behind the camera. Especially from a viewer standpoint at home. You might see this person for several minutes a day, but you have no idea what someone could actually be dealing with in their personal life. And I think for a lot of us, we have to understand that that you really don't know what someone is actually going through. And you're right, James. It does come back to the mental health. So, okay, we are going to move on now. Mark Ingalls sent us an email about the simplifying NWS alerts, which is 10 minutes to show. And there's my calling, but we'll give it just another minute. And Mark wanted to talk about the warning details for the UK and the impact matrix that they use, which actually some weather offices actually do use, and National Weather Service in Sterling, DC, does use this for winter storm impacts. And John actually, Dr. Scala, wrote back and why this might not actually work for the U.S. And I think the U.S. might have a little bit more tricky weather sometimes than maybe the UK does. You have more people, more impactful weather, and why that might not actually be the best idea. But then that also kind of brought us to maybe have a future guest on our show. So we might be having Eli Jacks to talk about the hazard simplifications and of course, Kim, who is also part of that project. And I think we have an upcoming show about that coming up soon. Another one, Jeremy Bauer, of course, who we had on, was it just last week?
Yes.
Memory serves me correctly. So Jeremy was on last week. He sent us a great email. So thanks, Jeremy, for sending us not just some guest suggestions, but also some show suggestions. And a couple were actually in the works. So we have some guest suggestions. Luke Doris, meteorologist in Miami. Jillian Rodriguez, Assistant Director of Douglas County, Kansas Emergency Management. Brian Smith, Warning Coordination Meteorologist at NWS Omaha. Jenna Blum, author. And we also have some show suggestions. 40th anniversary of the Terrible Tuesday, F5 Wichita Falls tornado. The anniversary will actually occur in 2019. 20th anniversary of the May 3rd, 1999 Oklahoma tornado outbreak. Can't believe it's going to be 20 years. Dr. John remembers that one well. And it looks like this one we're actually going to we have this put together, the Women in Meteorology special. Of course, Tina, who we had from last week in Hawaii, we're going to have someone from emergency management. It looks like Ginger Z, I believe, has confirmed. Looks like we have another meteorologist from the National Weather Service, and of course myself. And we're hoping to do that one on location in Hawaii, if we can get Tina to house all of us. So Tina, you're on the hot seat for that one. So thank you, Jeremy. And then Marcus Toops sent us a great email. New research finds tornadoes form from the ground up. And a really interesting article. If you haven't read it yet, it's definitely worth the read. And it kind of goes back to the El Reno tornado and some data that was actually picked up before the tornado actually touched down or formed from the ground up, and some information that was picked up from this tornado. So some interesting research. And it just kind of goes to show you how this field is so evolving and still changing, and how there's still just an immense amount that we are learning and continue to learn and have to learn about the field of meteorology. So thank you everyone for sending in these emails. Email at weatherbrains.com. We love to hear what you like about the show, some guest suggestions with some contact information, some show suggestions. If you find some of these great links, go ahead and pass them on. Email at weatherbrains.com. And on that note, I have a show to do.
Yeah, I got to go too. I got to go too. But I was going to say to Keith and Jim, you know, we're coming up on the 5th anniversary of Snowmageddon.
Oh, yes.
Just in time for the Super Bowl, James.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, Troy or Dr. John, one of you guys has to take it here, because some of us TV folks have to go. So
Gotta go to
Elton,
work.
flip for it. Go.
I'm gonna take off here in just a few minutes as well, but I'll do a pick of the week real quick. Just sent this out, guys. If you haven't seen this, and you may have talked about it before, and I know that probably Jim or Keith have probably seen this. Chris Gilhart up at the Central Illinois WFO up there has got a great page that basically goes through and attempts to look at some of the history of the Weather Service and some of the local offices. And I don't know, Dr. John, if you've seen this before, but it really is a cool website, just a link. And I've actually sent Chris a note before and had some things changed or gave him some additional information. It really is kind of a nice source that I'd really never seen before about 6 months ago.
No, I haven't either, Troy. So that's great.
So it really kind of gives you, I mean, it WSOs you and WSFOs you and to death before it's all over and done with. But it's really kind of cool to follow the history of these offices as they go back in history. So that's my pick of the week.
Okay, great. Thanks, Troy. Well, here we are, an hour and a half into the show, and I finally get a chance to say hi to everyone. So welcome to Keith and also to Jim. It's been a while since I had a chance to talk to you guys. Hope you're doing well. And of course, my first opportunity to meet you, Gary. So I haven't read your book, but now I'm going to have to. So let me ask each one of you. Let's begin with you, Gary. Do you have a pick of the week for us?
Well, maybe why don't you save me for later so I get to see what the pick of the week, what the culture of your show is.
It's typically weather related. It could be a link to a page of interest to you. It could be a link to your book. Go there.
Well, that certainly would be a good thing.
I think that's appropriate.
Yes.
Great.
Well, I spend a lot of time on the National Weather Service webpage for the Chicago office, and I trust it. And my wife likes to look at weather.com, but I go always to the NWS page. So that's my link, I guess.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Keith, how about you? Pick of the week.
Pick of the week. So it is winter season. So for those of you that aren't aware, the Weather Service is rolling out that severity index. I think it was alluded to, Aubrey was alluding to it. So the WPC is actually running it, and you can go to it, and it's run off from the Weather Service office's website, or from the office weather, the forecast. And it comes up with an impact index, a severity index of the winter storm based on a whole slew of different factors. And it's all rolling out this winter. It'll be linked off of the WPC website. Winter Storm Severity Index, WSSI.
Excellent. Well, we'll be watching for that. Thanks. Jim?
Probability-based tornado warnings. It was a blog that was done by Mike Smith. I don't necessarily agree with what he is saying to a certain degree, but on the other hand, I do agree that I continue to be alarmed about the tornado warnings and warnings overall from the Weather Service. I think they could get much better today without any change in anything going on, and I think it needs to get better.
That is a bit of a hot button topic. We could actually spend some time talking about that, maybe in a future show.
Yeah.
Now, my pick of the week is a recent article that showed up on Capital Weather Gang. And if you've been keeping track, the National Hurricane Center has named tropical or subtropical systems prior to the start of the official start of the hurricane season each of the last 4 years and 5 out of the last 7 years. So the point of the article is, should we be thinking about expanding the official season for the hurricanes in the tropics? Maybe extending it back or earlier into the middle of May. So it's a nice read. It's an interesting article. I think that's also an area of discussion looking ahead. Troy, anything to add?
Not really. I had seen your link, and I kind of grinned when I saw it, because I've had a feeling that discussion was going to have to be had at some point, and I think the article is interesting as well. So.
Okay, great. Well, it's almost the bewitching hour here in the East. I think, Keith, you're the only one that shares that with me. But at this point, I want to thank our guests for joining us on the show. This discussion, I think, will carry into the next one. We've had some great topics here. Having Kim back on provides a great insight into the sociological aspects of things, and also, Gary, in your book, I got to read this book. You got me hooked now.
Well, it's almost Christmas, and you can give it to all your family and friends.
There you go.
I have to ask you, I tell you, Gary, that I have 4 kids, and I've asked each one if they're interested in becoming a meteorologist, and their answer is no. They hear enough weather at home.
Yes, my kids don't want to be sociologists, so I know where you come from.
That's what happens.
Yes.
Well, at this point, I'm going to say thanks to our. There's the book.
There's a copy of the book. The cover actually won an award, a design award, so I can say this is an award-winning book. I guess I won an award from a sociologist, but the cover is really, really great.
Oh, great.
Gary,
Thanks, Gary.
Great to see you again, Gary, and glad to catch up.
Yes.
Thanks to you, Gary. Thanks to you, Keith, and Jim as well. It's been a great show. We appreciate you being on with us tonight. WeatherBrains comes on every Monday evening, typically at 9:30 East, 8:30 Central. And our second show this week will preempt next week because it's Christmas week. So join us on Thursday evening, 9:30 East and 8:30 Central Time. WeatherBrains is typically on once a week, as I said. I'm John Scala here with Troy, and we wish you a good evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay.
Gary, Troy Kimmel here. Nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure. I really enjoyed this. I used to give talks at the National Weather Service headquarters, shortly after the book came out and before it. Yeah. And, last decade or so, I really haven't had so much connection. So I'm very glad to be invited.
Jim, good to see you, man.
Same here, Troy.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
It has. It has.
How's retirement? Well, you already say you're doing the other stuff, so.
Okay, really... I'm going to hang up. Take care.
Okay. Take care, Gary.
Take care.
Good to see you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, Troy, it's really good. I do not miss the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And again, every organization has that going on, all that. But I was at the point where I was able to retire and have a consulting business, and life is good.
Well, good, man. It's really good to talk to you, and we'll get to see each other before too much longer.
All right, sounds good. Y'all
take care.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. Thank you for watching. Fun show this week. I'm in the middle of a newscast back here. Thought I'd check in real quick. We'll be over on Instagram, SpanWX, if you want to watch Song of the Night, that usual foolishness. But again, thank you guys for watching, and we'll be back Thursday night this week. That'll be our year ender. So we'll see you guys Thursday night. Thanks for watching. Have a great week, and God bless.